Hello, hello. Uta Hagen here of Trans Widow Uta Hagen YouTube channel. And I just wanted to show you the photograph from when I was 18 that I commissioned a painting from. And I have been trying to do a concise response to all of the new extra exposure of David and now his Debbie, and now his wife, Stephanie Hayton. And those of you who have been following me know that I so strongly objected to this appearance they made in a documentary that was supposedly more about teenagers who think that they should be the opposite sex in, and modify their bodies. But they had this scene with Stella O'Malley interviewing, and Stephanie kind of has this frozen look, I would say, and Stella O'Malley took a lot of criticism, rightly so, for saying, "But you got through it." And then Stella even didn't remember that that's what she said, but that stuck in my head. That's what she said. Um, excuse me, Stephanie had described going to the therapist that, they sent her to when her husband, David, uh, who took on the name Debbie, was doing his so-called transition. And she showed up at her therapy, which was like once every 6 weeks. Of course, he's going every week, and he's on this program. They told him to set a date for his transition. I mean, really, the reason that I am giving a little bit of oxygen to this, which I prefer not to, but the real reason I'm doing this is to point out the mental health malpractice of the psychologists, the psychiatrists, the surgeons, the therapists, all of the people who are in the pro-trans camp. And I'm gleaning details from my very specific, educated point of view regarding the ways in which the therapists are urging people to do this faster and faster. And in fact, Debbie Hayton did not do the details I'm able to glean are that Debbie-David Hayton did not do what is called the Blanchard protocol of at all times 24/7 making yourself as the opposite sex persona for 2 years before you even decide whether or not you're going to have these surgeries. What's happened is this field has just snowballed and avalanched into something much bigger than it should be. And individuals who come into a therapy session and know that they're supposed to say the suicide narrative, which apparently Hayton put that on to Stephanie also during that time, they they are put on this path. They are not treated really like almost any other mental health patient. They are put on a medical path of altering your physical sex traits. And this is a particularly interesting case in a way because Debbie Hayton admits openly that he's an AGP on a different channel that I think is now taken down. That was Maya K. Now Maya K detransitioned and had, I don't know if it's still there, but had a channel called Call Me Sam. But back when it was Maya K, David Hayton went on and he particularly promoted the idea that we have to destigmatize autogynephilia, which is the fantasy that a man has of imagining that he has a female body for the purpose of sexual arousal and climax. So that's who he says he is. Stephanie sidestepped all of the sexual part of this and says that they do not have, in her phrase, used in her op ed this last Sunday, I guess, in the Sunday London Times. She said that they don't have genital intimacy. I'm sorry, Stephanie. Somebody please send a link to this to her. This is an insult to marriage. This is an insult to monogamous intimacy to call it genital intimacy. Of course, she doesn't have genital intimacy if her husband no longer has his male parts. Of course not. But she has said openly she doesn't sleep in the same bed. They sleep in the same bedroom, but not in the same bed. I mean, maybe now that the children are moved out, there are 3 children, maybe she can have her own room. Maybe she can get a room of her own. They're good friends. That's what Marcy Mark Bowers says about Anne, the mother of his 3 children, who they're also not divorced, but they don't live together. He says we're like best friends. I bet she doesn't say that. Stephanie acts like Debbie Hayton is her best friend. I think that as a religious Christian, she is very invested in this family vessel being intact. And the other piece of it that isn't being brought up here, but I've heard it in other interviews that Debbie-David Hayton has given, is that in the therapy process, what the therapist did, like a dare, is to put the chair, another extra chair, in the middle of this little therapy room. And when he decided to move the chair, imagine how contrived this is. Every time before your patient who has cross-sex ideation comes in, you have to put a chair in the middle of the room. So that when he decides he's ready to make this brave and stunning decision to alter his body irreversibly by going to surgeons who have no ethics and no morals, then he will move the chair. That will symbolically be moving the 3 children and wife. I think that's interesting. Just like the 4 legs of the chair, he moves them to the side so that he can have sanctioned narcissism and focus only on himself. Now, I can't admire Stephanie as any kind of example because this public edifice of being happy in a sexless marriage and just talking about intellectual intimacy and so on is it will be used for other women. This is, Stephanie, what I think that you are not admitting. Other women, trans widows, are going to have your example held up to us. Why couldn't you do what she does? You have 3 children. Why can't you make this or that or the other sacrifice? Now, she did submit something for a governmental comment for the Gender Recognition Act. She says that my spouse does not have a GRC. The lack has made no difference regarding employment, social situations, or family. I am not going to repeat Stephanie's use of female pronouns for her husband, who admits that he's a man. So it's very weird. If the trans person is allowed to obtain a GRC without consent of the spouse, the marriage defaults to a so-called gay marriage in appearance with the implication that the spouse is gay. This is unfair and the power rests with the trans person. That's kind of interesting. She speaks on her own and she says it's unfair. Given that most people in this position are men transitioning to women whose spouses are women, this is indirect discrimination based on sex. See, in the UK, if it's a marriage, the spouse has to sign some paper stating that either the marriage is going to be dissolved. I don't know exactly if that means that it's an annulment, which that would be very nice if we could have that easy of a time in the States. She says, I suggest there should be a simpler form to complete which gives a quicker divorce rather than waiting 2 years for desertion or unreasonable behavior. So here, I mean, she really kind of speaks for herself here. Okay, transition is a serious undertaking with long-term implications on the trans person and the wider family if they're married. The necessity for transition and a positive outcome need to be tested before it is endorsed by the law. Anyway, I feel that she kind of has this yin and yang of trying to honestly tell how she felt, when this was going on. She woke up in the morning and said, well, I hope I can just get through the next few hours. I have been there and done that. I have found myself crying in public, explaining for my red nose and swollen eyes by telling people that I was having an allergy attack. So I feel that every interviewer of Debbie Hayton either leaves things out. The whole story doesn't come out, and that's why I'm putting this thing out with the story, this contrived business in the therapy room with a chair that you move. You move a chair, that's how you make your decision. Your family is represented by a chair with 4 legs. So Stephanie said, I'm not sure that I believed it very much. I saw the playful little boy, she says, in my husband. The priority was, let's keep the family together. So, I mean, look, she's a very strong person. She has this faith, religious faith, but this is basically more than a woman can bear. That is my message to these therapists. This is more than a woman can bear. And perhaps she gave in to his insistence that they not get divorced because she knew how strong he could be, and she might have feared how he would defame her. And he agrees that he was selfish and self-involved. And he says in this podcast on Our Path, which used to be called Straight Spouses Network, ourpath.org, at the time I thought I was including Stephanie. I was self-serving and selfish. He made her into the keeper of the calendar for his announcements. This is so interesting. Isn't that just so male? Like, my father used to absolutely rely on my mother as the keeper of their social calendar. When people would ask if he could do something, he would say, I have to ask my wife if I'm free that day. Not saying that that is the way it should be, but that's how it was in my parents' generation. The other thing that I will comment is that there was something Debbie Hayton wrote in, and it was published in, maybe it was from his Substack. It was published in Colin Wright's Reality's Last Stand Substack blog. And he said all this stuff about religion and the Godhead and male and female, and it was all really quite stereotyped. Stephanie says something about how she kept it together as a default position that she actively chose. And she says that they have so much shared history, she can't give that up. Now, what is not being admitted is that most men like Nettie, who are ideating the opposite sex persona, do not admit that they are a male. And they want all of those old pictures to be taken away. They want to alter your past. They want to say, my ex-wife, not my ex-husband. And I think Debbie Hayton is actually getting both negative and positive energy and remaining the center of attention and the narcissist by being what he calls the transsexual apostate. I guess that's the title of his book. By saying that, yes, I know I'm a man, and everyone who does these things like me should admit that he's a man. And, he gets attacked because of this. And then he complains about people like me who refuse to grant him any kind of entree into actual womanhood. Now, the other thing that I think was interesting from the Our Path podcast that they did together was that she says, it is a grief to me about her husband no longer being her husband. I think she's used religion to give herself strength. That's fine. I also have a sense that because he is this campaigner, Stephanie says, we can only have one campaigner in the family. So she's like tending the hearth at home, and she's given up her job teaching physics. Now she's working for the church, and she's kind of keeping things together. And maybe she knew intuitively that Debbie-David is a very, very strong personality, and that if she got divorced from him, that he might turn the children against them. She might unconsciously know these things. So please, if you are finding me here because you just discovered that your husband has been putting on your makeup and your panties, or he's been spending all kind of money on women's lingerie, etc., disappearing, lying to you, all this stuff, do not look to Stephanie Hayton as any kind of example that you should emulate. I think I got it as short as I possibly could. This is probably take 4. Now get outside. I'm going to be raking. I have all these paths I still have to rake out in my woods.